Last week, I spent 4 nights living in a Buddhist monastery in the mountains. This was the most life changing experience, and in the 4 nights that I was there, I learned so much about Buddhist teachings. I took a deep dive into the Buddhist teachings, which I've been interested in for the past maybe 4 or 5 months. But this really gave me a chance to explore it on a very deep level. And on top of this, I got a small taste of peace because I understand exactly now, going there, why the monks live in seclusion and how it's very conducive to their spiritual practice. So today, I'm going to tell you about the experience of living there 4 nights in the monastery. First time I did anything like this. I've never been away from a technology device for so long. That also had its learnings, so I'm going to talk about the learnings. And what I'll do is maybe while I'm speaking in the background, I'm also going to be having some photos and videos of the experience. I did not take any photos of the monks or the places, the huts that the monks live in due to respect and privacy. However, I did take some photos of common areas like the mountains and the general area on which the monastery was, so it will give you some perspective. It was beautiful, the air quality was stunning, and you had a bunch of different species of not only trees but also birds and all other animals. You'd wake up in the morning and the first thing you'd hear is at least 10 different types of bird chirps. It was absolutely beautiful. And also, one more thing, I'm not a Buddhist practitioner, I'm not a Buddhist by background, so whatever I share, maybe it's inaccurate, but this is just from my perspective, from what I saw. So if I'm incorrect, please forgive me, because this is just from my limited understanding of Buddhism and my experience in the monastery. But I hope this video ends up being insightful for you. The monastery is situated in regional Victoria in the mountain ranges. Eastern side of Victoria, Australia. And basically, they follow the Thai forest tradition of Buddhism. And it's a distinctive school of practice known as Theravada Buddhism. And this emphasizes meditation, simplicity, and living in harmony with nature. So a lot of the monks, I'd say all of the monks, they actually live, the monastery is in a main area where there's parking and stuff like that. And obviously in the main monastery you have two main halls, meditation hall and one for Dhamma talks, and then you also have the place where the food is served. So all the main stuff is there, but actually there are quite a few routes behind that where it kind of goes into the forest, into the mountains, and these walking paths very thin. That's where the monks walk along, and ultimately maybe 5 or 10 minute walk into the mountains is where they live in their little huts, which are also known as kutis. The Thai forest tradition of Buddhism, it's rooted in the teachings of the Buddha, and it focuses primarily on the monastic life and monastic practices in the natural environment of the forest and the mountains. Central to the practice of the Thai forest tradition is deep meditation. And this is particularly vipassana, which is insight meditation, and samatha, which is calm, abiding meditation. And monks in this tradition spend a lot of time meditating in secluded areas, in their huts, in the forest areas, to basically cultivate mindfulness and concentration, and also to help them gain greater insight into the nature of reality. When they see the forest, they kind of understand the impermanence of things, and they can reflect that insight to all other aspects of biological organisms, whether it's themselves, but also to understand the transience and the impermanent nature of all things. So I was told that the Thai forest tradition is one of the most popular traditions that people want to get into because it is one of the roots of Buddhism, which is one of the most fundamental practices from which Buddhism originated. And basically, obviously, there are a lot of silos of Buddhism and a lot of different practices and things of this nature. However, I was told that people who want to get to the root of Buddhism like to follow the Thai forest tradition, and they normally start there and from there branch out, either stay there or branch out to other forms of Buddhism. So the monastery is situated on 500 acres of land, And what's incredible is, I remember when I was there were other guests like myself, maybe 3 or 4 other guests, and they had all been there before. And they enjoyed it so much. The first time they all came was maybe for 1 or 2 weeks or a couple days, and now quite a few of them were staying on for 1 or 2 months. And the monastery is so massive, on 500 acres. I remember they were telling me, "Do you see that mountain?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they said, "Oh, the monastery goes even behind that." And what about the mountain after that? Yeah, the monastery stretches all the way there. So the monastery has a significant amount of land. And the monastery is a training monastery primarily for Buddhist monks known as bhikkhus, novices known as samaneras, and postulants. So those are people who are looking to get into the religion, known as anagarikas. But also, of course, it provides quite a supportive and a conducive environment in which individuals, families, visitors, and also residents are given the chance to be in contact with the principles of the Buddha's teachings. And hopefully they can cultivate those qualities and those principles in their own lives, whether it's a personal or professional level. So what was interesting for me is they used this term called lay people, which I hadn't really heard of before, this term. And lay people basically refers to people who are not monks or nuns, and they have not taken formal vows of renunciation. So lay practitioners are ordinary people who follow the Buddhist teachings and practice the path of the Dharma while still engaging in their life in the city or in the world. They live in society and they maintain families and participate in regular jobs like everyone else, but they also seek to live according to the Buddhist teachings, the Buddhist values, and the Buddhist lessons, and also to conduct themselves ethically and morally in line with Buddhist teachings. So the key aspects of lay people in Buddhism is that they normally follow 5 precepts. And the precepts are basically moral guidelines. So the 5 are refraining from killing living beings, refraining from stealing, refraining from sexual misconduct, refraining from false speech, and refraining from intoxicants that cloud the mind. When you are a guest lay person, you're staying at the monastery, then you are asked to follow 8 precepts of Buddhism. And these are refraining from killing, refraining from stealing, refraining from sexual activity, refraining from dishonest speech, refraining from drugs and alcohol, refraining from eating after noon, refraining from dancing, singing, and music, and refraining from cosmetics, perfumes, and jewelry. As lay guests, there were a few things that we would be doing. Besides holding the 8 precepts while we're there, we had a schedule that we were following. This includes waking up very early in the morning. And before the monks actually come for breakfast, we prepare the breakfast, and the breakfast is very, very light. And we also help to clean up and take things away. Also, from Monday to Friday, there would be tasks and duties to carry around the monastery. This may be, for me, I clean the Buddha statue. I also clean the floor of the temple. And other people are maybe working on watering the plants or cultivating the landscape while you're there, or maybe doing some stuff in the workshop like woodworking. Some other lay guests, when I was working on cleaning, one of them was working on painting, and another one was working on varnishing the wood. So there's a range of activities or tasks that needed to be done around the monastery. It was very big, so there's obviously a lot of work that needs to be done. If you're a lay guest, there's actually no cost associated with staying there. You can stay for multiple nights. The condition is that when you do the tasks, you do them fully, and that, of course, you assist the monks when needed. So food also is included because that's all donated. And we even had in the guest cottage, there was a bunch of toiletries such as shaving cream, shower gel, shampoos, all stuff that had been donated. So it was actually very, very comfortable. The rooms that we had were very minimalistic. They included just a straw mat that you sleep on, which is on a wooden bed frame, a bedside table, and a small cushion on the side for meditation. But that's pretty much it. The guest cottage had an abundance of Buddhist books. I mean, more Buddhist books than you can imagine, written by different practitioners or maybe followers of the philosophy. So I know that in my free time, I was definitely absorbed in reading as many books as possible, because obviously those books were there to stay in the cottage. They belonged to the monastery. But I used that opportunity to read and also then ask monks questions about what I read, and maybe even apply that to practice when it came to chanting, meditation, and also when it came to the Dhamma talks, which is when every day after lunch there'd be a senior monk where they'd have some lessons, but also they'd leave it open to the lay people to ask questions. So that's also when I kind of ask questions. When it comes to eating, the monks would eat one meal per day, and this is lunch, and they would eat before 12. So lunch would be at about 10:45 a.m. and they cannot eat after 12. So in the morning they can have like a little snack, and it's only certain foods that they're allowed, and stuff that's quite light, like maybe oats and nuts and stuff like this, maybe some tea. And then the main meal is at lunchtime, and by lunchtime it's like 10:45, and then finally they can have a little tea at about 6. They have a little tea, and this is maybe some dark chocolate they have, because they're basically, because they are not allowed to have milk after a certain period of time. So dark chocolate allows them to have that milk, which is still contained within their requirements. So they have that, and cheese. So different types of like grilled cheese, halloumi cheese, and this, and a little bit of tea, but no milk. So the main meal is lunch with two small snacks at breakfast and dinner time. So we also had to follow these rules when we were living there. And basically what happens is they are not allowed to cook, they're not allowed to make food. It's part of their rules. So we as the guests, because we're not ordained monks, we were the ones that prepared the meals for them when it came to the breakfast snack and the dinner snack. And for the lunch, this is when they depend on the public to basically make some food. So every day there would be a bunch of people from the community, Buddhist people, who would come and donate their food. And we as the lay people meaning people who are not Buddhist monks, we would basically take the food, we'd set it on the table in preparation for the monks to eat it. And what's interesting is, if there's 30 trays of food, then the layperson has to basically lift each tray, and then the monk will touch it and put it down. So this is done maybe 30 times. Then this food is considered offered. Because if this food is not offered, then it's considered as stealing for the monks, because it needs to be explicitly offered. If it's not offered, then it goes against their rules, and this is classified as stealing. So they need to follow quite strict rules even when it comes to offered food. If someone else touches it again, a lay person, then it's no longer considered offered and it needs to be offered again. So we, like the monks, would also be eating from a steel bowl. So what's interesting is, I'd say about maybe 85% of the people that were there were Sri Lankan, and maybe 10% were Thai, maybe 10% were Thai, and the rest were maybe Malaysian, Cambodian, and other smaller Southeast Asian countries. So what happened is, when we are serving ourselves the food, we went around and we have one steel bowl, just like the monks. It's very interesting because by the end of it, you have Sri Lankan food with Thai food with maybe a little bit of spaghetti, and then even the fruits on top, and a little cupcake for dessert. So all of it is kind of put in one bowl. And generally, you cannot go back and fill up again. So what you do is you need to eyeball and make sure that it's about the right portion, and you need to eat it all before 12. So then we serve ourselves. First the monks serve themselves, then we serve ourselves, all from the steel bowls, and we put it down. And then we would, before even eating, the monks would then go up to their places to eat. We would basically move all the food trays out and the food tables out for the community to then eat. So the community would then have the same food. And basically before eating, you bow 3 times like this, 3 times to the Buddha statue in front, and then you eat. And everyone there, I mean the guest people who were staying, me and 4 other people, were there to basically deepen their knowledge of Buddhism. And a lot of it is about silence. There's a sound of silence. So even when you're eating, it's full mindfulness for every single bite that you have. It's full appreciation for every single bite that you have. The conversations that we had were very limited. In fact, I'd say I don't even remember having any conversations while eating. It was just sitting down, eating, and then putting the bowl out to clean. That's pretty much it. And with the remaining food that was left, once it's given to the community for them to have, they ate from plates. Then we would basically give back the remaining food and the Tupperware to the respective people who have donated the food. So every day this was the same kind of format for food for lunch. So you might be wondering, why is it that people would basically continuously come every single day and donate food, donate items such as toiletries, donate supplies? Why do they do it every single day? What is the incentive for them? So basically, the whole goal of a monk's journey in this lifetime is to work towards reaching enlightenment. And if they can't do it in this lifetime, then they've worked to a high enough stage that if they're reborn again as humans, they've already reached a level where maybe the next life or the progressing lives, they're very close to reaching enlightenment. So basically, the incentive is that if someone is helping to feed a monk, especially if that monk attains enlightenment, then they in turn, the lay person, will get good karma. So it's good for them as well. Also, when the lay people are feeding the monks, they are feeding the monks for their bodies. For the monks' bodies, they're helping. But there's a reverse situation, or it's almost reciprocal, because the monks are feeding the lay people with wisdom, with Buddhist teachings. So every day after lunch, there's a Dhamma talk, which is basically where the community members are able to go sit in front of a senior monk and ask questions, whether they're personal, professional, relationships, whatever they are. They're able to ask questions, and the monks are able to, at great depth, for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, answer these questions through the teachings of the Buddha and kind of give advice that would be conducive to them overcoming their obstacles. So it's good for the monks because they obviously cannot buy food. They don't have bank accounts. They're not allowed to have their own money. It's good for the monks because they are getting food and nourishment for their bodies, and in return, the lay people are getting food and nourishment in terms of their minds, for their mental well-being. And they're getting the Buddha's teachings. So it's a very reciprocal relationship. So there's also a term called the Sangha, and this is a community of monks and novices, and they live according to the Vinaya, which is known as the code of monastic discipline. And these are rules established by the Buddha. And in accordance with these principles or this discipline, the monastics are alms mendicant. And this basically means that they are people who rely on alms or charitable donations to survive. So this is both in terms of food and also in terms of money. And they also live lives of celibacy and frugality. Above all of this training provides a means of living mindfully and reflectively. And it's a guide to keeping things to a minimum, not only in terms of possessions, but also in terms of what's happening in the mind. So when they have possessions, there's a set of robes, an alms bowl, and one meal per day, and a sheltered place for meditation and rest. So this is basically like their kutis, their small huts. But besides that, they really own nothing. The monks came from various backgrounds. There were a couple Australians, maybe 1 or 2 Sri Lankan monks, a few British monks, and a few from Malaysia. So the backgrounds of monks were quite diverse. In the monastery, when we were speaking with the monks, we would speak like this as a mark of respect. So whenever we're speaking in communication, we'd speak like this. I noticed that even amongst the monks, they would also speak like this with each other, especially when it was one monk speaking to a more senior monk. The monks had different titles, and whenever we spoke to any monk there, we'd use the title Venerable. And Venerable is a mark of respect for senior monks. especially those who have spent quite a few years in practice and have attained a good amount of wisdom in the Buddhist practice. Then is Ajahn, and Ajahn is commonly used for senior monks who are teachers. So the senior most monk, I believe, was Ajahn, and he was the abbot or the head top level monk in the monastery. And then is Luangpor, and this title means respected father, and it's often used for monks who are highly revered and may be the head of the monastery or temple. So basically, in the Thai forest Buddhist tradition, the titles, they carry not just social respect, but also imply a certain level of responsibility for each corresponding title. And this is responsibility in terms of teaching, in terms of leading meditation practices, and in terms of embodying the core Buddhist precepts. Before the monks enter the lunchroom, it's also considered very good karma for you to help in washing the monks' feet. In the monastery, whenever you're going, whenever the monks or lay people are going in any hall, lunch area, a hut, anywhere, the tradition is to always take off the shoes, because it's all about a tradition of also cleanliness. So when one helps to clean the feet of a monk, this is considered to be very good karma. So I actually ended up doing that for, I think, my second last day. I helped to clean the feet, and it was a very humbling experience, actually. A very important custom in the Thai forest tradition of Buddhism is alms rounding. And this is basically where monks go out to receive their food offerings from the lay people. Obviously, we lived in a monastery, and it wasn't like the olden days where monks would actually go from the forest all the way to the town, because basically here the lay people were coming and donating their food in the monastery itself. So what happened was, the monks would actually go in a line, and the lay people who had donated food would basically all line up with their plates and maybe 1 or 2 spoons of rice in their plates. So the lay people would line up, and they would, as the monks were walking by them, each lay person would put in a spoon of rice into their bowls, and they would have this rice. Ultimately, they would probably empty it out before entering the lunchroom, but this was more just to preserve that traditional custom of alms rounding, which is very embedded in the Thai forest tradition of Buddhism. So this practice of alms rounding is deeply rooted in Buddha's teachings, because it's an essential part of cultivating and nurturing the relationship between monks and lay people. Lay people basically give food to the monks as an act of merit making, while monks rely on these alms obviously to sustain themselves, because they depend on the kindness of lay people for food and sustenance. It's good to note that a lot of the terms used in the monastery are from Pali. Pali is an ancient language, and that holds very important significance in Buddhism, especially in the Theravada tradition of Buddhism. And Pali, fun fact, is actually closely related to Sanskrit, but it's a more simplified version of the language. Now obviously, living in a monastery is great. It's great for having peace of mind, to get some clarity, to kind of reset your mindset, or maybe have a circuit breaker from the busyness of your daily life in the city. However, living there long term, I'm not sure it's there for all of us. I don't think it's there for me, at least for the time being. So my question is, how can I get these learnings that I got from the monastery, and how can I take it back to my life in the city? And how can maybe you, from what I'm taking to the city, maybe you can also ponder over how this can be ingrained into your life. So one great lesson I learned is the idea of minimalism. Minimalism, obviously, in terms of possessions. I noticed that when I was in the room, it was very easy to keep it clean, because there was pretty much nothing else to rearrange. There was no clutter. Everything that was there was necessary and needed, but nothing else that was not needed was there. And I realized, when comparing to my own room, how obviously my room has way more stuff, but still I was managing very happily in this room in the monastery, if not better, because I wasn't worried about clutter, putting things in the wrong place, and worried about leaving a mess. Everything that was needed was there, and that's it. The minimalism also, I think the reason they have few possessions is also because it trains the mind to focus on what's important. When you aren't worried about possessions, that doesn't create unnecessary attachment, and also a clean environment will manifest in a clean mind. So minimalism is something that obviously I've been kind of practicing for the past few years. So maybe I need to be even more minimalist, not to the extent of the monastery, but maybe cut out the added clutter that I see in my cupboards, in the living room, wherever it is, to kind of create that clean mind that I hope for. This also, I think, extends to the idea of minimalism in what you're doing. The monks are very busy. They have many, many things that they're doing, but when they're doing one thing, they do it fully. And then they take that hat off for that task and they put another hat on for the other task. So they have many tasks, many hats to balance, many things to do. But when they're doing that thing, they aren't worried about all the other back tasks in the background. What they're worrying about is just that task. And then when that's done, then they worry about this task. So there's also simplicity in just doing what you need to do in that time. So essentially really inculcating the lesson of mindfulness. Another great lesson I learned is being in nature. Obviously, you cannot be in better nature than in the monastery because you're in the forest, you're in the mountains. But I think even in my city life, I can go to the park near me. Whenever I have maybe a couple hours, I can take a visit to the botanical garden. But I feel like nature really connects us to our ancestral consciousness. It keeps us also aware of the transience of nature, and also by extension the transience of our lives, the transience of consciousness, the transience of situations, feelings, perceptions, emotions, thoughts, everything. So I feel like being in nature really kept me grounded and reminded me of the transience of problems as well. And Eckhart Tolle also, he's a famous spiritual practitioner, and he says that if you look at a flower or anything in nature, it reminds you to stay present. It's literally a significant symbol of presence. So when I look at nature, it reminds me actually to be more mindful, and it really helps to ground me. Another great lesson I learned is to detox from tech. So now when I'm waking up in the morning, ever since I came from the monastery, I'm staying away from my phone like the plague. Especially in the morning, I realized how I had so much clarity just not looking at my phone, and really once again being in touch with my ancestral consciousness, just not being so absorbed in the blue light and actually having the sun wake me up rather than blue light dictate when I should fall asleep and when my melatonin should be suppressed. It gets me more in touch with my biological clock. I noticed even the past few days just staying away from the phone, especially in the morning and at night. I also noticed that spending less time scrolling allows me to be less absorbed in news that's quite negative. I'd say even if the news is quite positive, I feel like just being more in touch with myself and more comfortable with myself rather than a distraction from the phone, it's allowed me to actually stay more present and actually be more calm and find that serenity that I'm looking for in my day-to-day life. And another lesson was no music. In the monastery, no music was allowed. I noticed that when I have music, and I used to always have my earphones plugged in, and every single free second of the day, I'd be having my music in. And I noticed that really also dragged me away from just sitting with myself. I think I was just trying not to be with myself. I think I was just not comfortable with myself, and I was running away from myself. So the monastery gave me a great chance because there was no escape. And I realized that ultimately we have nothing to fear in ourselves. As long as we face ourselves, we'll realize that there was not really much to fear. And when you realize that there's not much to fear, you'll actually be very comfortable and you look forward to sitting with yourself. Music, I notice, can make the mind very hyperactive because when you're listening to something, you'll have 1,000 thoughts related to it. Of course, there's a time and a place for music, but I noticed that when every waking second of the day, when I have a free moment, I have the earphones plugged in, it really takes me away from being at one with myself. And I also notice a difference in music when I use it as something for inspiration to drive my emotion versus as a temporary distraction. And I think I was using music a lot as a temporary distraction. So there were obviously a lot of lessons from the monastery. I think that if you get the chance to go to a monastery for a couple nights, you have nothing to lose, but everything to gain. So if you get the chance, 100% I'd recommend it. I think my only regret was that I did not stay in the monastery for longer, but definitely I think I'll take a visit next time and maybe make it more than a week visit, because I feel like the longer I stayed there, the longer I noticed the benefits were for my well-being. Thanks, I hope this video was insightful, and take care. Bye.